Raskin of Maryland is the incoming top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. As you know, this would be a truly extraordinary step to blanket pardon people who haven't even committed crimes, haven't been accused of crimes, haven't been convicted of any crimes, to shield them potentially from Trump. Is this the right move?
Well, it's certainly a sign of our extraordinary times where you have an incoming president of the United States who's making threats of prosecution and jail towards private citizens. And so it's obviously something that should be looked at. I mean, members of Congress, of course, are in a somewhat different position because we are covered by the speech and debate clause, which insulates us not only from criminal prosecution for doing our legislative duties, but also from civil attack, and also not just at the federal level, but the state level. And of course, a presidential pardon applies just criminally, and it applies only against federal offenses. So I think this applies more to people like maybe John Kelly or Mark Milley. These are former Republicans, former Trump staffers who he has threatened in very vehement ways in different contexts. Those people, I really think, it makes sense for those people to be considered for whatever kind of protection can be offered to them in the event that a Department of Justice opens up, which views itself as a bureaucracy of revenge and retaliation against the president's perceived political foes.
Senator-elect Adam Schiff, as you know, who Trump once specifically named as a so-called enemy from within, is against preemptive pardons, telling Politico, and I'm quoting him now, it would seem defensive and unnecessary. Is the alternative that potential Trump targets outside Congress should brace for possible indictments and legal action against them by Trump and his team?
I mean, I suppose the argument for it is that even if a person has done nothing wrong, that doesn't make any difference to Donald Trump if he perceives it to be a criminal offense just to cross swords with him politically. And in that event, I can understand the logic of exploring the possibility of protecting people who might be in that category. There are a lot of former Trump employees. Take, for example, Michael Cohen, somebody who Donald Trump and Attorney General Barr oversaw the jailing of, and he was put into solitary confinement for 17 days before a federal district judge in New York ordered that he be released and said that his being put into solitary confinement was clearly an act of retribution and political retaliation. So this is not fanciful, outlandish stuff. And I think that if I have no reason to believe the Biden administration is doing this, but if they're actually considering looking at helping people in that kind of situation, Lev Parnas might be another one. Mark Milley, John Kelly, as I said, I think that makes sense. And Liz Cheney presumably is covered by the speech and debate clause for everything that she did while she was in Congress. But, I haven't looked at the legal particularities, but there are obviously people in the Trump entourage who are calling for her head in a legal sense. And so I think it would make sense to check that out. Again, I'm speaking without knowing anything about what's going on behind closed doors.
Are you at all concerned about your potential with the incoming Trump administration? As a lot of us remember, you and other leaders of the January 6th Select Committee were cited by him as violating the law, if you will.
Well, as I said, Wolf, the speech and debate clause is very expansive in its protection of members of Congress doing their legislative duties. Serving on a select committee to investigate a violent assault on America, an insurrectionary attack against America, is clearly within our legislative duties. So is serving on an impeachment team after the House has voted to impeach a president for inciting insurrection. So the Constitution covers what we do in Congress, and of course the First Amendment covers what we do outside of Congress. And again, I would be more concerned with people who worked for Donald Trump who have no protections like that constitutionally, other than the First Amendment, who the incoming president has said he wants to go after. And, that's not a legitimate function of government. It's not a legitimate role of government, and we don't want to have a regime of fear and intimidation. And those of us who are in Congress are going to stand up against that. This is the United States of America, and we have constitutional rights and freedoms and liberties, and nobody, no matter how high in the government, no matter how low in the government, can violate the rights and freedoms of the people to participate in politics.
Yeah. Important point. You're now running unopposed, Congressman, to be the next ranking member of the very powerful House Judiciary Committee after Congressman Jerry Nadler dropped out. Why did you feel it was necessary to challenge him?
Well, we're in the fight of our lives, Wolf. There is an incoming administration which has vowed to turn the Department of Justice into an instrument of political revenge and retaliation and persecution of individual American citizens. We've got an incoming administration which doesn't seem to care about any constitutional boundaries. They're threatening to impound funds that have been appropriated for particular purposes by Congress and use them for other purposes. And that was, of course, something that Donald Trump did in his first administration when he redirected money from other lawfully appropriated functions to building the wall in Mexico, which he had promised the people of Mexico were going to pay for. But of course, that promise was broken. The people of Mexico, the government of Mexico, didn't pay for it, and so they tried to redirect money from other places. So, I have vowed that I will not allow the Constitution of the United States to be put into any kind of shredder or processor. We're going to defend the separation of powers. We're going to defend the First Amendment, the right of the people to assemble. We're going to defend the lawful prerogatives of Congress. We're going to defend judicial independence, and that's our job. And the Judiciary Committee is the front lines of that defense. And so I offered myself to the caucus. Chairman Nadler, whose career is extraordinary, over a half century in New York politics, in the United States Congress, has endorsed me. And, that's just a process that we go through, Wolf, as we get ready for the next Congress. And I'm thrilled that we're going to have a lot of unity and a lot of focus on defending America against any attacks.
Congressman, good luck with your next challenge, and thank you very much for joining us, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Appreciate it. Coming up, a closer look inside the New York City Police Department and the mountain of resources being